in the chat could let me know that are we live now? Hello. If we're gonna stumble upon some awkward moments, let's just roll with them. As I said, this is my first time streaming like this. I am new to this. I am being a boomer, and I'm comfortable with that. So for everyone who's here with us, hello. My name is Paulina. I go online by Cupcake Kami-sama. Thank you so much for joining on this creatively named panel called Creating a Coordinate Not Based Around a Main Piece, a 5-step guide. The fact that this is the best name that I could come up with tells you a lot about the state of my head right now. But it's straight to the point. It tells you exactly what will happen. It tells you everything you need to know about what I'll try to cover in the next hour. Even though there's some structure to it and I'll be going through the motions and whatnot, don't wait until, thank you so much. Don't wait until the end for any questions. If there's anything that you want to ask about now, drop those questions in the chat. I'll do my best to answer them. I'll do my best to multitask and look at my notes, look at the chat, remember how to words. Words aren't always as easy as they seem. And then hopefully I'll manage to fit everything that I've got in there in about 45 to 50 minutes, so that we'll have a comfortable 10-minute window at the end to also ask and answer any questions that you might have. Thank you, Joel. I'm glad you're excited for this. Okay. As I said, bear with me. I am being a boomer. I am trying to multitask. It will be what it will be. So, in true spirit of education, which is my background, not to call them lesson objectives, but essentially what we'll do today, what we'll cover today, we'll go over 4 broad categories. So I'll start with reasons. Why on earth might you want to coordinate in such a backward way when there's a way that works, that's tried, that's tested, that there's absolutely no problems with? Why would you want to make life harder for yourself? I'll briefly stop on a comparison of the sort of 2 styles of coordinating, starting with a main piece and starting with something else with not a main piece. I'll use some pictures so that we can see them side by side and determine, is there any sort of difference that people on the outside, people who aren't us, might be able to pick up on, and to decide from there whether there's even any point in doing a coordinate in such a backward way. Before finally getting to the actual meat of today's panel, the process itself, this will be a step-by-step with some visual aids. We have cats in the chat and in the stream. This makes me extremely happy. And then at the end, as I mentioned, I'll answer any questions you might have, any that I haven't answered as we went along. I'll do my best to answer them. And where I can't, I'll try to point you in a direction of some resources that I think might be useful in answering those questions. So with a quick break for a drink, because I'll be talking a fair amount. Reasons. As I said, why on earth might you want to go about creating an outfit in such a backward way? And to sort of preface the reasons a little bit, thank you so much. This means a lot to me. And to preface everything that I'll say, I am using Lolita Fashion specifically as the sort of springboard to all the tips, advice, opinions that I'll be giving, because this is the one that I am most comfortable with and one that I have the most experience with as far as J fashions go. But in reality, everything that I'll talk about today could be applied to any kind of fashion style that you might do, whether it be J fashion or any sort of Western styles. It's more about a mindset that you put yourself in whilst creating a look, an outfit, a coordinate. But everything I'll do today, we'll use later fashion as examples. So once you think about reasons why go about creating an outfit this way and not the standard, the tried and tested one, they break down into three fairly neat themes and categories. The first one being theme specifically, whether that's a themed meetup or an event like the one we're all attending right now. They provide the perfect opportunity to try something different. And in many instances, you might find yourself thinking, using Fantasy Foray as an example, well, I don't have a fantasy themed dress, but I have a pair of elf ears, or I have, something with a dragon on it, whatever it might be. That's when you find yourself going, I can still create a themed coordinate, an outfit that matches the occasion by using this smaller piece, this non-main piece as my starting point. The next reason might be to challenge yourself, whether you're into prompt challenges like I am, admittedly, and prompt challenges are fantastic for that because they inevitably force you into a position of having to think outside the box by saying, put an outfit together based around a pair of shoes or an accessory or whatever it might be. Equally, you don't have to use a prompt challenge whatsoever. You can just want to try and challenge yourself on your own terms and see if this is something that you'd be able to do. If you picked something that wasn't a dress or a skirt or a pair of shorts or whatever, went with something smaller, would you still be able to create an outfit that you'd be happy with? Challenging yourself and trying new things is how we grow. And last but certainly not least, this pure appreciation. It's not just the dresses that are pretty. I think this applies especially to Lolita fashion, where every single item within a coordinate is detailed and intricate and has lots of points about it to celebrate, to admire. So wanting to showcase that particular item is a very valid way of constructing a whole look around it. And it's just one way of showing that it's just your way of appreciating that thing. Chat being very quiet. As I said, I do have some background in education, so to me this almost sounds like when I used to do lectures with students, everyone is very quiet. As I said, I am keeping an eye on the chat, so don't feel like you have to be quiet. Feel free to jump in with comments, with questions, and I'll get to them as I see them. But then, you have all your reasons, perfectly fine. Whatever reason you have for building a coordinate around not a main piece is legit and valid, and I support you in it. But is there even a point in doing that? Is there a difference in building coordinates that way versus the standard way of, I'm going to choose a main piece and start from that? So let's use some visual aids. I'm very big on visual aids. And to begin with, I'll show you these two coordinates using Hey Nooley's Just One Bite JSK I have. Hopefully on your screens, this is relatively big enough so that you're able to pick up on some of the smaller details of each outfit. But to make it slightly easier, let's bring these even closer together so that it's a more immediate comparison. The reason why I've picked this and these two outfits as the comparison, obviously it's the same dress, so it makes it a more level playing field. But also it's the same wig. I appreciate the filters on these pictures aren't making this the clearest, but it is in fact the same wig. It's also styled in very similar ways, at least on the pictures, all you're seeing is the front. And it's also the exact same pair of shoes and the exact same pair of socks. Now, if someone were to look at these coordinates and go, which one is built around something that's not the dress? it might not be obvious when phrased like this. The left coordinate is the one that started with the dress. The dress and the occasion that it was worn for, which was a Halloween meet, were more important than any singular component within the outfit itself. And it's just the standard way of coordinating things, especially with Lolita fashion. You start with a dress and build around that. Consider, the practical factors like the event, the weather, whatever it might be. The one on the right, sorry, I had to think about that. Left and right sometimes trip me up. The one on the right, the one with the hat, was for the Around Your Wardrobe in 30 Coordinates challenge. And it was for a prompt specifically called Based Around a Particular Top. So the jacket works with this dress, but at the same time, it dominates over it a little bit by obscuring basically the entire top part. And the whole coordinate has a more of a theme to it compared to the left one. This isn't to say that when you're starting to build outfits around something that isn't a dress, that themed and big and OTT is somewhere that you have to end up at, but it's certainly the easier way of going about that, and it's certainly the one that will be more immediately obvious to your casual bystander, to someone who's looking at two outfits and is being asked to guess which one started with a dress and which one might have started with something else. What would I say about building cords based on a color combo? Absolutely in favor of that. I don't think there's any bad way of building a coordinate. They're all equal in value in terms of what you end up with. They merely require different mindsets and different approaches. So if you're starting with a color combination, you're going to have to either have maybe an image of what you want it to end up at. Do you want the standard sandwich look of color 1, 2, 1, 2? Or are you going for a gradient, or are you going for a more chaotic splatter? That's somewhere where I'd start if I was going with, I'm trying to do a coordinate with these colors. But as I said, I don't want this to end up as seeming that, well, if you're coordinating around not a main piece, then you have to end up with something that's big, that's OTT, that's themed, that's leaning towards character looks or anything like this. Because ultimately, that's not what it's about. So to use another comparison, here are two outfits using Violet Fane's Ginzaki satin skirt. And again, to make this a bit more immediate, here they are literally side by side. This time, both coordinates are in a similar place on the casual to OTT scale. You could argue that one is slightly more relaxed and less detailed than the other, but the differences are negligible, especially when compared to the previous example, when one was very much, this is big, this has a theme, this gives me a backstory, whereas these are just two looks that were worn, and that's about it. Once again, the layout of the slides is exactly the same. I'm not trying to trip anyone up. So the left coordinate is the one that started with the skirt. And you can see that as the color scheme of the whole look was dictated by the skirt, as was the styling around it, including the accessories, which tried to pull at some of the themes within the skirt, mainly the food ones. Whereas the coordinate on the right, especially if you exclude the hair clips, only has one piece of accessory, which you can hopefully see. It's the necklace there. It's a tea bag necklace, and a little close-up to aid the point there. This is the chain that the necklace is on. So in this particular case, the outfit started with the necklace, and it's the necklace, its color scheme, and its theme that determined what might be the best main piece to use and what colors might be best to use before everything else came together. Ultimately, your casual bystander or observer is likely not going to be able to put a finger on what exactly is different unless you exaggerate the features of your chosen item, or unless they are inherently quite bold. Like in the previous example, the jacket that was the starting point of the coordinate was quite big, was quite voluminous. It had a feel to it, as opposed to the necklace here, which is, it's just a necklace. It's very literally a tea bag on a chain. That was a whole other set of drama in my life of when this arrived, and I realized, no, this is a tea bag on a chain. No word of a lie. But as I said, if your point is to try and make whoever's looking at the outfits immediately guess, well, that outfit started with this, you're probably going to have to exaggerate everything about that outfit to try and highlight whatever it is you've chosen as your starting point. In other cases, like with this one, it's a play of subtle nuances and things feeling different to what said casual observer bystander might have expected or might have seen on you before. So they might go look at these two and say, one's clearly darker, one's lighter, one's brown, one's yellow. But it would take them a little bit longer to get, oh, hang on, the one on the right only has one item of accessory. That could be something that triggered all the changes that you see. So with that in mind, having gone on for about 15 minutes already about, the whys and the is there a point, let's get to the step by step, because that is what I want to spend the most time doing today. I'll be visualizing the process with photos of a flat lay coordinate for tomorrow's tea party. I am mindful that the description of this panel said live demonstration, and there were genuinely possibilities that this might be more of Joelle's Chord with me style thing. But ultimately, this was just not practical. There's no way that I could have pulled that off. And also, I felt that by doing it with pictures, you'd be able to see things a little bit better by the picture taking up most of your screen. And for anyone catching this later after the event, hello, future people, they'll be able to pause and zoom in and look at details at their leisure. So as I said, I'll be using coordinate that I plan on wearing tomorrow for the tea party as my example here, and go through those 5 steps using that chord as my visual reference. And to give you the overview of the process to begin with, so that you'll know what to start thinking about before I go on and explain it or add more details to it. It starts off with the feature of your item that you're choosing, then going into a sort of quick inherent motif theme vibe check, if you will, making sure that everything is in harmony, making sure that you're not hiding whatever it is that you've chosen as your starting point, and doing the typical final check of, is everything working together nicely? Is there anything that might need moving? There's also, in theory, a step 0, but I didn't want to come across as over-explaining the obvious. But step 0 is choose an item. Taking notes, take screenshots. Hopefully everything that's on there is clear enough that just by taking screenshots, you'll be able to have good notes. I can make the slides available to everyone at a later date. That's not a problem. So step 0 is choose your item. And what I've decided to use is this chain of office. And for anyone who's not familiar with the term, chain of office is a large necklace that you'd see across shoulders and neckline, mostly worn by people in positions of power. So historically royalty, in modern days, like mayors of city, for example. It's one that I've made myself. And in this particular context, I'll be using it as a belt rather than as a necklace. I made it, I can unmake it, and that's exactly what I'll be doing. So, and throughout the rest of this presentation and panel, I'll be referring to it as a belt rather than a chain of office. I might slip here or there, but for the most part, it will be referred to as a belt. So that's my starting point. I'll get into the whys of it as I go through some of the other steps of this process. But this is what I'm beginning with. This is what I've picked. At the moment, this is all we have. The rest is a blank canvas. The rest is going to be built throughout this panel. So when you're picking a feature of your chosen item, you can be literally anything. What you're looking for is some sort of a starting point, something that will make things a little bit easier and organize your thoughts in a way and channel them and direct them into one way rather than scattering everywhere. So it can be a color, it can be a texture, a shape, a motif, a vibe, a specific element of the item that you've picked. Like, I don't know, some headpieces have little charms. Pick that little charm if this is what's tickling your fancy. The whole point of doing a coordinate starting with something that isn't a main piece is because you want to showcase something about it. So hopefully when you are at the stage of deciding what will my starting point be, there's already an item that's jumping at you. There's one that you think, I simply have to make a coordinate around this because I love it so much. Some things will be easier to use than others. The more detail a piece inherently has, the easier it will be to find something within it to showcase and to build upon. This isn't to say that you can't use, let's say, a very simple plain pair of Mary Jane shoes, just that if this is what you go with, it will significantly narrow down what you can use about it to showcase. Something like this chain of office, there's textures, there's colors, there's shapes, there's a bit of a vibe with the sort of regal and power associations. That's already given you several options to play with. Whereas with something like the plain pair of Mary Jane shoes, you're mostly working with color, potentially shape, maybe texture, depending on the material that shoes are made out of, if that's something that you could pull through the rest of the outfit. For example, if the shoes are velvet. As I said, it's not that it's impossible to use simpler pieces. It's just that things that are inherently more detailed and intricate make life easier for you. And especially if you're trying out coordinating around not a main piece for the first time, going with something that has that level of extra detail will guide you down a more obvious path, but it will let you get used to doing the process and getting familiar with it. In my case, for the coordinate that I'm building right here, right now, metaphorically, because it's obviously pictures, what I'm picking up on are three things. Firstly, the color scheme, the golds and the reds. Secondly, not inherent to the item itself, but because I am building an outfit for the tea party, for Rosé Forêt, I am working with an added theme that I'm trying to match. So I'm trying to make this fantasy in one way or another. And that leads me to the third feature, which is the fact that this belt is made of quite geometric shapes. It's squares and ovals, yes, with added frills and filigree detailing, but essentially it's squares and ovals. With that sort of color scheme, that sort of geometric shape to it, and knowing that this is going for a fancy event, in my head, that translated into dwarven aesthetic. Not going for any particular dwarven lore. I'm not picking at anything specific, just going broadly with dwarves and their the typical aesthetic that they're being portrayed at. Seeing as in most fantasy franchises, you'll see dwarves as mining communities. So they need things to be a bit more practical. They love their shinies, but also a lot of them will have, what's the word I'm looking for? They'll have ornamentation and decoration with very straight lines, with the right angles, things that are quite geometric and easy to carve in stone. And then fairly, to apply onto clothing with decoration, easy to craft in metal, easy to embroider since you're doing straight lines only, all of that. Some of it is also purely because I've always been a bit of a fantasy hipster. And whilst everyone around me who loved fantasy was going nuts over elves and elves this and elves that, just for the sake of being different, I still to this day am kind of indifferent about elves. So knowing that I was working for an event with a fantasy theme, it awakened that hipster in me of going, elves are too mainstream. I want to do something different. Hence landing on dwarves and trying to give dwarves a bit more representation. We then move on to that inherent vibe check. The sort of, does the piece that I've chosen naturally add a motif or inspire a theme? And the key word here is naturally. As I've just explained with the belt, by all means, the occasion that you're building the cord for might apply a theme to whatever it is that you're doing. But the check is mostly about, does the item itself have something to work with? So, wrong side. So there's only two ways this can go. It either has something that you can, use throughout the rest of the coordinate, like a motif or a theme or an element that you can add throughout, in which case follow that lead and bring it into the whole outfit. Certain things will be quite easy, especially within Lolita fashion. Certain motifs are very common, like flowers or food or crosses, depending on your sub-style of choice. But equally, it could be something a bit more obscure, like or broad, like nature or a specific animal, whatever it might be. If your item of choice has that, it's easy to lean into that, and there's no shame in going down the easy route. I saw somewhere that elf aesthetic is Art Nouveau and dwarf aesthetic is Art Deco. I think I heard that as well. Now that you're saying it, it rings bells. I might rethink my choice of outfit for tomorrow, but we'll see about that. So yeah, there's only two ways that your inherent vibe check can go. It either has stuff or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then don't worry, don't fret. You can still pull inspiration from that piece. You're just going to be using different elements. Like I mentioned earlier, you still have colors and textures, shapes, even the things that this item makes you think of that you can use and apply throughout the rest of your outfit. So in my case, yes, in theory, the belt has an inherent vibe of being regal. But other than this, there isn't anything specific to it. It doesn't add much. I'd have to get into very specific things with it. So in my case, the coordinate that I'm building is based around the belt, but without pulling anything from the belt that isn't quite generic, like the color scheme and the shapes. So knowing that that is what I'm working with, my brain immediately went to two items that I knew were in my wardrobe. The first was this dress. It's an OP by Metamorphose called Classical Sister. It has a whole bunch of detachable parts that I've removed because I wanted just the dress itself. It fits the bill for me by virtue of being red, by virtue of being quite simple. So again, in my head going, dwarves, mining communities, they need their clothes to be sturdy and practical. And decorations and frills are either limited or are applied on top of the clothes rather than within the clothes, and certainly not much through cuts, at least in my head. And it has that bit of geometricity since the neckline is square, so it mimics and references the squares on the belt. And whilst the lace trims are quite sparse on this, the lace is pure white, so it kind of ends up referencing the pearls in the belt in a very happy coincidence. It wasn't what I intended. It wasn't one of the things that I considered whilst choosing this dress, but once I put them together, I realized, okay, this is working on this level as well. And the second thing that I knew I had to at least try to use is this necklace. The necklace is actually a piece of Indian bridal jewelry that I have as a remnant from my days of being obsessed with Bollywood cinema. And I've not found a way to either incorporate it or get rid of it in a way that I'm comfortable with. So it just lingers in the depths of my wardrobe. But the shape of it is what I immediately thought of. It's not necessarily too clear on these two pictures. The necklace itself doesn't sit quite straight across like a choker would, but the pendant, by virtue of being, that sort of almost complete circle, ends up referencing the ovals in the belt. It's obviously the same color scheme of gold with red, with some nods of white, very few, but nonetheless still there. It's slightly different shades of both red and gold, but once it's worn, there's so much space between the two that the eye doesn't necessarily focus on that for too long. I mostly picked it because of the shape, because of it being geometric, and because of the colors. And because I thought, well, if we're going with dwarves, and if already the belt is adding at least that hint of some sort of dwarven royalty, let's lean into that. So those were the two things I picked immediately that I knew had to form a part of my final outfit and that I was going to build upon later. And now I'll pause for a second. And I say pause, I'll still be talking, but I'll pause in the sort of intensity of what I'm talking about to ponder this particular quote by Victor Hugo, who said, "To put everything in balance is good. To put everything in harmony is better." The reason I want to stop on that quote for just a moment is because as soon as I read it, it made me stop and rethink how I approach coordinating Lolita fashion and building outfits in general. When we say, a good outfit, especially in Lolita fashion, has to be balanced, this isn't to say that that piece of advice is wrong. You still want to try to make sure that everything that you added there is working together, that there isn't one thing overpowering everything else and dominating the entire look, unless that's what you're intending to do. However, when we say balance, the implication there is that everything isn't even and equal amounts. And whilst that definitely keeps and creates a nice overall harmonious look, it's not the only way to keep your outfit looking well put together, with everything working with each other and not against each other, and having that overall harmonious effect. It might seem like a really random picture of a bouquet next to it, but I have deliberately chosen it because had this bouquet tried to represent how we're taught to coordinate Lolita fashion, we'd immediately go, well, this isn't balanced. The white flowers need to be a little bit in the middle and a little bit at the end as well, which it might still look nice. That doesn't mean that this particular bouquet is any less good looking. That's what I'm trying to get at with saying harmony might be preferable to an outfit than balance. And I think this will apply especially when you're building your coordinate with something that's not a main piece as a starter point. Because once you think about it, when your starting point is a dress, and for the sake of the argument, let's say you're working with a JSK, you're immediately filling in most of the center of your whole person. You're having a good chunk of your torso covered, and everything from waist till approximately knees covered just with one item. So it's easier to then build the outlying bits to balance the dress out. If your starting point is something different, let's say a pair of shoes, you're having to readjust your way of thinking to either coordinating in a linear way from the bottom where your shoes are to the top, or maybe in a clockwise or counterclockwise direction, depending on what is it that you're trying to achieve with everything else. If your starting point is something even smaller, let's say a ring, then not only is it in a slightly inverted commas awkward place for a coordinate, because it'll be there sort of middle to the side of your person, you're having to spread things outwards and fan them out, so to speak, but it's also significantly smaller what's the word I'm looking for? It's a smaller piece of the overall look. One ring is not filling up the same amount of physical space as a dress. So trying to make everything balanced whilst working with something so small, I'm using the ring I'm wearing as an example here, trying to make everything balanced with only this much of my entire person is a lot of work. So as long as you think about it in terms of my end result has to be harmonious, it has to work together, even if it's not perfectly balanced, it can still be a very successful coordinate that you'll be very happy with. I'll stop for a second to see what sort of comments I've missed whilst I've been going on about this and going on about harmony. Seems like I need a basic dress to play around with accessories. I disagree. It's certainly easier to make accessories pop against a solid colored dress. But as I mentioned earlier, ultimately, it's you who knows that your coordinate started with a particular item, even with something quite big and difficult to hide, like a pair of shoes. It might not always be obvious to someone looking at the coordinate that this is what everything started with. So I'd say printed items can still work and highlight and complement your chosen item. It just depends on what is it that you're working yourself with. What's your starting point? What are the main pieces you can pull out and use at your disposal and whatnot? A simple, non-printed, solid color dress is certainly going to help in making that work, but I wouldn't go as far as to say it's the only way of doing things. Victor Hugo would be an OTT classic stan. I mean, yeah, I think most literary classics who aren't explicitly into Gothic probably would be. I learned while planning my wedding that it's better to have clusters of colors as opposed to spreading them out. That's a very good metaphor. Just because it's clusters of colors rather than everything in equal distances from each other doesn't mean that it's any less harmonious and looking any, that it looks worse than the very strict 1-2-1-2 approach. And I think the same applies to outfits. As long as you sort of make sure that everything is there and that there's enough elements in your entire outfit to point to the fact that it's not a mistake on your part to keep, for example, colors imbalanced, that it is your deliberate choice, absolutely go for it. It's what makes things a bit more interesting, and what keeps Lolita fashion so fun to play with. Yes, the added element of trying to still keep it Lolita feels like a barrier at first, but once you get over that, it really gets into some fun territory. So I'll keep moving on because I'm conscious that I still have a bunch of stuff to get through. So this is what I then moved on to. I've had the dress, the belt, and the necklace, and I threw on other stuff onto my bed to play around and see which pieces I like. I like the look of everything else that I've chosen. So these were all the options that I considered. Some of them were immediate, some of them were disqualified immediately, like the wrist cuffs. They just ended up being too frilly and too fanciful, even though on paper, the color scheme and the pearls worked quite well. And the rest of them ended up more of a sort of, let's try this, let's try that, and faffing about with it, as is the very scientific term. The next step is very self-explanatory. When you're creating a coordinate that's not based around the main piece, the important thing is to not hide it. I've deliberately put this overdress with the coordinate here to use as a visualization of that point, because whilst looking at the picture, and as I was looking at it in person, this isn't necessarily a bad look, and it could go some interesting ways. The overdress hides the belt, and therefore this now stops being a coordinate that's based around the belt. Even if I were to put the belt over the overdress, because of how frilly and voluminous it is, it still would end up not only covering significant parts of the belt, but also just overpowering the whole thing. The overdress is so larger than life that it steals attention from where I want it to be, which is the belt. As I hinted at earlier, there are some items that are easier to hide and some that are harder to hide. You'd have to do a fair amount of throwing stuff at a pair of shoes to hide them, and that's not something that is typically being done in Lolita fashion. So if your starting point is a pair of shoes, you're probably not going to worry about this part of the process so much. But if what you've chosen is a headpiece or an item of jewelry or legwear, you're going to have to keep that at the back of your mind. Again, this isn't to say that otherwise you'll end up with a bad outfit. Absolutely not. Just to say that you'll end up with an outfit that started as being inspired by a piece rather than an outfit that's based on that piece. Hopefully that makes sense. And, I am here to give you some tips, some takes on the specifics of coordinating around items that aren't a main piece. Not here to teach you how to coordinate Lolita fashion in general. Hopefully you either already know or you know where to find that sort of information. There's plenty and plenty of advice and guidance if you want to go into that. But I'd say trust your instincts, coordinate in a way that's comfortable and natural for you. If any of you were in Joelle's Cord With Me live stream just before this one, you'll probably already have picked up on what was the starting point and where the outfit ended, and with all the different comments that people were dropping. Everyone had slightly different opinions, not to say that anyone's ideas or suggestions were bad, just that everyone's style of coordinating is slightly different. Just because yours might not fit the bill as described in whatever guide doesn't mean it's wrong. So coordinate as you find it comfortable, coordinate in a way that works for you, and just make sure that you're ticking all the boxes that you want to tick. At the end of the day, it's up to you to then label the outfit once it's ready. And that leads me very nicely to the final point, which is just about those final checks. You've done the cord, you've put it together, either on your bed, your floor, your mannequin, your body, wherever it might be. Do the final checks. The item you've chosen, the piece of choice that started all of it, is it there? Is it visible? Is it still doing what you wanted it to do? Is the outfit as a whole cohesive and harmonious? Is it working the way you had hoped it would? Is it Has it deviated slightly in any way? And are you happy with the way it's done that? Or do you still want to mess about with it? And then the look, overall look itself. Are there any tweaks needed? Things will always look different, flat versus worn. So there might be some adjustments that you'll need to account for. And equally, there might be some things that you could add or remove once you are at the stage of putting the look in 3D rather than flat. So, makeup and hair will always add things to your outfit. If you're going for a particular theme, then making sure that your makeup and hair still fit that theme within what you're capable of doing will be part of that final check. It's nothing different than the stuff you'd do anyway with any other outfit, really. But like anything to do with coordinating that isn't giving people the basics. For people who have been wearing and putting together outfits for years and years, this process is instinctive. So to break it down into steps that you can give to someone and say, try that, requires a little bit of over-explaining. This, as you see on screen, is the final flat lay version of the outfit I ended up with that I plan on wearing. As you can see, granted, the last time you've seen this was with all the other options that I was considering around it, but it is significantly pared down purposefully, because again, going back to what I was trying to achieve, this geometricity, the color scheme, the sort of that my imagined dwarven aesthetic, all of it is there. We have reds, we have golds, pops of ivory/white to give tiny nods to those pearls. Some of these things might still change depending on how I feel about them on the day, because the final worn version I can't show you yet. That will be seen tomorrow. I'll see it for the first time worn tomorrow. I've genuinely not even tried to put it on. I have some ideas for the look and styling that I play around with, but even to me, I don't know what the final look will be. So you'll catch it at the virtual tea party tomorrow. I'll be at the Unicorns Grove time slot. I can't remember off the top of my head what times that actually falls. But if you're not attending the tea party, I'll still be sharing pictures of that on my social media, on my blog, wherever I can think of. It'll be there. You'll get to see it. EDL, Elegant Dwarven Lolita. I love that. But that is pretty much it. Everything that I've wanted to cover, I've been able to share. Of all the practice runs I've done of this panel, this is probably the most concise and to the point and the least rambling one that I've done. So do ask any questions that you might have. I'll do my best to answer. As I said, we have just about 15-ish minutes to go over that. I'm dropping my links to the various online places where you can find me at. I'm most active probably on Instagram, seeing as I'm there at least once a day, where I'm as cupcake_kamisama. You'll find me on my YouTube, which I've gleaned in the chat. Someone's very kindly mentioned that as well. Thank you so much, kind soul. I'm also Cupcake Kamisama on YouTube. I have a whole series of videos called Advanced Coordinating. It's less hold your hand step by step like this was, and more these are some broad ideas and themes and opinions to consider if you're wanting to elevate your coordinating game based on my experiences. And you can find me on my blog. It's cupcakesandunicorns.blogspot.com. I go on about all kinds of things that are related to Lolita fashion, sometimes less, sometimes more. It ranges from some very specific things to outfits to general ramblings and thoughts that I just need to get out of my system, and writing them down feels like the best way of doing so. The Advanced Coordinating series has helped me a ton. Thank you so much. That's really heartwarming to hear. I'm really glad. I think there's 10 videos, and in total there's about 3.5 hours or so of video content. So there is more on there. This particular panel came to be as a sort of offshoot that I almost made an advanced coordinating 11 out of that, but decided that it wasn't quite big enough for that. And then the event came along and I thought I might as well bring it there. Love the code I came up with. Thank you so much. And I'm very glad that I was able to help anyone out there think about coordinating in a different way, because that's ultimately what I want to do. I think with Lolita fashion specifically, it's so easy to fall into the prescriptive step by step, do this, do that, do this, do that, in this order, in this way. And not to say that this is bad in any way. We all have to learn to walk before we run. But getting out of that can be hard, is the only way to put it. It can be hard to break out of that mindset. So sometimes you just need someone to point it out. And I think it's going to be especially hard for all the Lolitas who only joined the fashion during the pandemic, because most of what I've learned and how I came to the various conclusions that I'm sharing online through my hot takes came to be on the back of me attending meetups and being able to see how other Lolitas are dressing themselves. When you can't see the person physically next to you to be able to appreciate those smaller details and go, so you've put a brooch here. Interesting. I'm going to try that. Hopefully, videos like this and live streams like this are there to help people understand that there's more than one way of going about the same thing. I actually wanted to make a call revolved around an item I had made, and it's helped me make it more cohesive. Yay, I'm so happy. Can't wait to see the coordinate. Feel free to tag me anywhere. I'd love to see it. Love to see what you came up with. Lolita in August 2019. Yeah, it is what it is. I've known plenty of people who started either in 2019 or smack bang in the middle of 2020. And the way they are coordinating things is very clear that they've gained their knowledge from the internet. And again, not to say that there's anything wrong with that. The internet is there to share those advice and those details. But when you're not exposed to variety and differences and don't have the time to spend or the energy to spend to dig through the depths of social media like Instagram to find the less algorithm pushed examples of how Lolita can be done, how else are you going to work out that maybe there's another way? By all means, I'm always here to encourage people to experiment and say, what's the worst that can happen? You put the experiment together, it doesn't work out. You're the only one who knows that it didn't work out. You don't need to be sharing that with the rest of the world. Paulina's unite. Some of us Lolitas just don't get face meet interactions. Absolutely true. And being a Lolita is 100% valid. I think there's plenty of merit to just being fancy and frilly on your own. But that means that if you're wanting to expand your horizons and be exposed to different ways of coordinating, you rely on what you can find on the internet. So I'm very glad that things that I put out there with mostly my opinions and the ability to put thoughts and feelings into words that people can tangibly apply to anything is the skill that I apparently have, and hopefully it comes across and helps other people out there. I think, we still have a few more minutes. If there are any other questions, any comments that you want to make, drop them in the chat. If there's any slides in particular that you'd like me to go back to form your thoughts more better, That's the influence of my colleague. If you want me to go back to any of the slides to form your thoughts better, or just to point something on there, by all means, I'm happy to do that. Best Lolita tip you ever got / found. It's not coordinating specific. The best Lolita tip I ever got, it wasn't directed at me. It was something that I heard whilst being given to someone else. But it's, if you like something from an indie brand or from a smaller brand, anything that isn't a major Japanese brand, buy that. The reason being, once an indie brand or a smaller label sells out of that thing, the chances of it emerging on a second-hand market are slim to none. Again, depending on what the brand in question is, some of them have more, not to say resale value, but they appear more often than others. And if it pops up secondhand, it might not be at retail price, it might be more. Japanese brands, by virtue of the esteem we held them up to, are always going to pop up. Yes, there are certain pieces, especially the really old ones, that if you've seen them once sold somewhere secondhand, it's a miracle. In my experience, everything I've ever wanted from a Japanese brand, I was able to track down. If not get, then at least track down and see it be sold somewhere. Whereas there's a couple of pieces from indie brands that I missed out on that I'm probably never going to get. So if you find something that's from an indie brand, that's from a smaller label, that's from a smaller creator that you like, get it. If you don't like it, once it's in your hands, you can always try and sell it on. But if you miss out and are trying to find it again later, you might have to come to terms with the fact that it's not going to happen. And that is a piece of advice that I've heard, I've ignored twice and regretted it very bitterly. One of those times, very fortunately for me, was actually Hainoli's Just One Bite JSK. And it only so happened because I managed to join the fashion and join the community at a time where Hainoli was still active, and then catch Hainoli during the farewell reservations. But there was another dress from another Western indie brand that I looked at the time, thought it wasn't for me, and then it kept growing on me, and nah, it's not going to happen. I don't even know if they released if they've sold 5 of these or something like this. It was very limited. And people who bought it for keeps. I'm actually going to get out of my presenter notes. I don't need them anymore. I can just focus on the chat and on yourselves. Thank you so much for stopping the screen share. But if there are no further questions, and I'm conscious that there's still, I think, about 2 minutes until the scheduled end time of the event, just under. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Thank you for bearing with me through my brain fogs and words being difficult to listen to me go on about some thoughts I had. It was you've made it an excellent first time streaming experience. So thank you so much for this. As I said, I can make these slides available publicly for downloading later. I'm not sure how yet. I'll probably drop them on my blog. That might be the easiest. And you'll be able to go back on them anytime. See some of my my presenter's notes on there. Not sure if there'll be that much extra help, but they'll be there for you to use. Your glasses are amazing. Thank you. These glasses are not like yours. They are actually full-on lenses, so I'm probably reflecting a bit of my laptop glare. But they're another one of those items that I saw and immediately had to have. I think I got them online from, I think, Ublins, not sure how they're pronounced, Ublins. They might still be on there. They're a very cheap retailer for glasses if you're looking for stuff like that. Right, I'll leave you there then. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great rest of your day or rest of the evening, depending on which side of the pond you're on. And hopefully I'll see some of you tomorrow at the Unicorn Grove Fantasy Foray Tea Party. Bye.